Welcome back to Afraid Movies. Today we're going to be taking a look at a 2007 crime drama named Flawless. Spoilers ahead, watch out for that and take care. Let's assume you recently got a job as a janitor at a big diamond company, then suddenly a mysterious person contacts you and asks for your help in stealing millions of pounds worth of diamonds from the company. Would you do it? The story begins with a hand foraging in some mud and trying to find what looks like gemstones, which turn out to be uncut diamonds. Then we see the bustling city of London, and then we see an elderly woman called Laura Quinn sitting alone in a cafe as her guest arrives while talking on the phone. Her guest is Cassie, a young reporter who wants to write a story about Laura. As they start talking, Laura brings out a diamond of 168 carats and 58 facets from a little case and hands it over to Cassie, who is amazed by it. Laura utters the words, "I stole it," and then begins to tell the story of how she stole the diamond from the London Diamond Company. As she begins telling the story, we go back to 1960 in London, where we see Laura, a young businesswoman entering the building of the London Diamond Corporation, where she is working as a manager in a largely male-dominated company. As she goes through the lobby, she says hi to an elderly man named Mr. Hobbs, who is the company cleaner. We see a man walking through a corridor named Mr. Eaton, being followed by two men pushing two trolleys. Eaton opens up a large vault and the two men fill up the trolleys with diamonds and take them to the desks for examination. Outside, the owner of the company named MKA arrives at the building with his son Ali amidst a group of protesters. They enter the building and go to an office where the directors and staff are waiting to discuss the news of 100 diamond workers that were killed at a mine site in Africa. Laura then tells MKA that the Russians may cut ties with the company because of the bad press. MKA announces the new managing director as a man named Peter Boland, passing over Laura for a sixth time. He doesn't choose Laura because he doesn't want to break the company tradition by making a woman managing director. Later, we see Mr. Hobbs entering Laura's office. He tells her he thinks people should take what they desire. Later, we see Laura exiting the building, the last to leave as usual. The next day in the hallway, Laura meets a man named Harold Reynolds, who she met at Oxford University. He hands Laura a business card and suggests she may like to work at Allied Banking, the company where he works. The following morning, Laura finds her inspirational note, but with a negative remark written at the bottom. She also finds a cinema ticket with a time session written on the back. During her lunch break, she is overcome by curiosity and makes her way to the cinema. She finds Mr. Hobbs waiting for her as she enters the cinema. He suggests they sit together. Laura doesn't want to, but then he catches her interest when he tells her he overheard a conversation between the directors discussing the termination of her job pretty soon. He offers her a plan to steal enough diamonds to make them rich, but not enough to be noticed. She doesn't trust him fully and warns that he will never get away with it. Later, we see Laura at work and she finds a letter of her employment termination. She then makes an appointment with Harry Reynolds. They meet at a restaurant and sit together. Then Harry tells Laura his company cannot offer her a job because they think she is incompetent, due to some rumors spread by her company about her. Later at night, she falls asleep on the sofa and has a dream of the security men at work catching her trying to steal diamonds from the company. The next day, she goes to find Hobbs at the horse races and asks him how he plans to rob the company. Hobbs tells her he has a plan. They then go to Hobbs' apartment where he explains his plan. Because the code to the vault is changed weekly, he needs Laura to find the codes at MKA's study at his house. He tells Laura to entertain the Russians when she attends a social event at MKA's house. He tells her he can carry enough diamonds in his thermos to get both of them a comfortable retirement. On the night of the social event, Laura is in the company of MKA's second-in-command, Mr. Jameson. He tells of how the company's insurance director, Sir Sinclair, was implicated in a health insurance scandal, but he wasn't persecuted for it. Later, Laura goes upstairs and goes into MKA's study to look for the codes to the vault. She then hears footsteps and hides as MKA enters and opens a little secret safe on his bookshelf. She watches him and takes a note of the code he entered. Once MKA leaves, she opens the safe and gets the codes to the vault. The next day, as Laura is walking down the hallway, she sees a man on a ladder installing a security camera. Later, she meets Hobbs in a cafe and tells him about the 8 CCTV cameras being installed. She also tells him the cameras go on and off alternatively for 60 seconds. He guarantees her that is enough time for him to get in and out of the vault. Then we see Hobbs mopping the floor of the security room and timing the cameras simultaneously. Once he returns to the cleaner's room, he set his stopwatch and begins his operation. While looking at his stopwatch, he rushes down to the vault with a trolley and puts in the code. Meanwhile, Laura makes a call to the security room as a distraction to buy Hobbs more time. After typing in the code, he watches his stopwatch, then opens the vault door and rushes down the vault corridor to avoid the camera. The next morning, we see Laura watching Hobbs go home from work, but then the clerk calls Hobbs back inside to unblock a toilet before he leaves. Then we see Hobbs at home emptying his thermos into a sink, but there are no diamonds. The next day, after the diamond sorters have all gone home, Laura goes down to the reception to find Jameson in a bit of a panic and he rushes off. We see Laura in the ladies' toilet when Mr. Eaton comes to get her and takes her to the vault. When she enters, she slows down in shock as the vault is completely empty. Next, we see Mr. Eaton walking down the corridor, showing a man named Finch the building plans and telling him the only way into the vault is through the vault door. Then we see MKA telling the management and staff gathered in his office that there will be no investigation into the incident because the bad publicity will ruin the company's image. Sinclair then introduces Finch as a private investigator, which the company hired to find the missing diamonds. Then we see Laura and Hobbs going down the stairs. She asks him if everything is all right, but he reassures her that all is well. Then Laura goes to MKA's office where we see a man named Boyle who works as a proxy. He is giving MKA a letter regarding some inventory purchases. Mr. Boyle is apparently unaware of his client's identity and the content of the inventory purchase. Boyle gets called out for a phone call, and while he is out, MKA reads the letter which states that he can purchase the diamonds back for £100 million. Boyle comes back into the room and hands a package to MKA before he leaves. MKA opens the package and finds a large diamond known as the South African Star. Later, we see Finch asking Laura questions and notice she's nervous. The next morning, we see Laura suggest to Jameson that she wants to help Finch with his investigations. I think she made this decision because she felt trapped and never agreed to any of this with Hobbs. She then finds Finch and they go to the vault together. He tells Laura that the CCTV cameras are not very efficient because of the 60-second time gap. He also tells her that there were no forced entry, and she suggests to Finch that the thief must have known the combination. Next, we see Sinclair in MKA's office and he offers Sinclair £5 million so he can keep trading, but MKA rejects his offer and says he wants the diamonds back now. Then Laura and Finch enter the office and Finch suggests that MKA's son, Ollie, may be part of the operation. MKA loses his cool and threatens to destroy Sinclair's reputation if he doesn't pay the ransom. Next, we see Hobbs and Laura in an underground enclosure, where Laura tells Hobbs to give the diamonds back and make an agreement, but Hobbs says they will go to jail for that. Now we see Laura peering at the plans of the building, when Finch enters and takes her fingerprint as just a formality and asks her to follow him as he goes to question Hobbs. When they begin the questioning, a man soon comes and calls Finch away. Before Hobbs leaves the office, Laura again suggests they negotiate or go to jail. Hobbs tells her his cause is worth 100 lifetimes in jail. Now we see Finch looking at Laura's fingerprints and comparing them to some found at MKA's home, while Laura is looking through Hobbs' locker to look for clues of the location of the diamonds. Later, we see Laura and Finch at a bar having some drinks. At the London Diamond building, we see the press arrive in numbers and force themselves into the building after Sinclair tipped them off. Sir Gottfried, Sinclair's chairman, tried to hold them off. Meanwhile, MKA comes down the stairs, sees the press, and suffers a heart attack. He falls down the rest of the stairs to the lobby floor. Back at the bar, Finch asks Laura how she removed all the diamonds from the vault, but she tells him she is not that smart. At that moment, Finch is informed of MKA's heart attack and he leaves. Now we see Laura crying uncontrollably in the ladies' toilet and drops a diamond from her earring into the sink's drain. She bends and removes the pipe from the drain and suddenly realizes how Hobbs removed all the diamonds from the vault. She goes back to the company, takes a torch and down to the underground drainage systems. As she looks around, Hobbs suddenly appears with a torch from down the tunnel system. Laura threatens to turn Hobbs in, and he points a gun at her and tells her she is not going anywhere. She knocks the gun out of his hand and tries to run but trips and falls. As she raises her head, she sees a large diamond on the tunnel floor, which she picks and puts in her pocket. Hobbs then tells Laura he has no interest in the ransom or diamonds. He then proceeds to tell her about his wife and how her cancer could have been removed, but the insurance company stalled too long, and by the time they responded, the cancer was already too aggressive. Sinclair was the company's insurance chairman at the time Hobbs requested aid, and he was the one who stalled the intervention for Hobbs' wife's surgery. Laura then realizes that Hobbs is trying to get revenge on Sinclair. Hobbs tells Laura that Sinclair took away the only thing he ever truly loved. Now we see Sinclair in an office, agreeing to pay the £100 million ransom for the diamonds, which he does. He then goes to his office and commits suicide. Now Laura tells Hobbs of how she dropped her diamond earring down the sink and figured out how Hobbs had hidden the diamonds. Then we see a flashback of Hobbs taking all the diamonds to his workroom. Now we see Ollie receives word that ransom for the diamonds has been deposited, and Boyle hands him a note that is supposed to show the location of the diamonds, but the note is blank. Now we go back to the flashback where we see how Hobbs emptied the diamonds down the sink. The South African star was actually what blocked the toilet Hobbs was called back to clean. Now, back at the tunnel, Hobbs points the gun at Laura and pulls the trigger, but there are no shots, and he is shocked to realize the gun was never loaded. He stares at his watch and tells Laura it doesn't matter now as the money would have been paid. He turns off his torch and walks away. Laura then walks down the tunnel and turns a corner, only to find the diamonds piled high at the end of that system. She tips off Finch, telling him she followed a hunch. Now we see a lot of people down in the tunnel with some carrying bags filled with diamonds out of the tunnel. Laura sits on the steps with a blanket around her. Finch tells her he has lost 5% finder's fee since he wasn't the one that found the diamonds. At this point, I think Laura is about to confess, but Finch stops her with a hand over her lips. He tells her he would hate to see her spend the remainder of her life in jail. He then waves her goodbye and leaves. Laura then remembers the large diamond in her pocket but decides to keep it. Now we see Ollie outside of the vault with a bunch of pressmen, and he tells them the diamonds were not stolen and allows them into the vault, and they take photographs of the diamonds in the vault. Now we see Laura back in the present day telling Cassie she left the company a month later, and how she got a letter from a Swiss bank where Hobbs apologizes and gives her the ransom money as compensation. Laura then hands Cassie a manuscript of her story to publish, hoping to inspire other females. Now Laura details how she deposited all the money to different charities all over the world. All this while Cassie was reading the manuscript and arrived at the final words. Now, Cassie runs out of the cafe to look for Laura, but she's already gone.